welcome back. How many of you, is this your first time? I know I see a lot of familiar faces, but all right, we have a few newbies here. Okay. So welcome. I'm Chris, and this is the Nintex Chicago User Group Meetup. This is a Suburbs edition. So for those of you who don't know, we meet here in the Burbs about once every other month, and then we meet downtown about once every other month. Depending on which is easiest for you to get to. We keep the content different each time, so it's not like we repeat it. So you can go to both if you want to. Today we're going to talk about automation from anywhere. And the whole point of this is to try to take us out of SharePoint land and into the idea of business process automation with Nintex, using the Nintex Workflow Cloud platform, and kind of give you a couple ideas of how you might want to use that. Talk about some things like external start, other app integration, etc. So, there we go. Our agenda for today is pretty brief, but I've got a lot of demo content for you. So we'll do some introductions. You just met me, and I'll introduce some of my colleagues here. We're going to talk about kind of the evolution of Nintex workflow, and where it was when it started, where it is now, what that means for automation outside of the SharePoint world. What is the Workflow Cloud? And then we're going to dive into some demos. The last thing is I've got some other fun stuff kind of not related to our original topic for today to show you. So Nintex just released the Responsive Forms Designer, so we'll demo that. You can all sit here and just pretend you're paying attention to the original presentation, and then if you not enough, then I'll get to that other fun stuff for you. So all right, let's get into introductions. My name is Chris. I work for PSC Group. A little bit about me. I've been doing this for 8 or 9 years, something like that. 8, I guess. It was 2009. I've been doing Microsoft development. I am a Microsoft MVP. I am a Nintex Virtual Technical Evangelist, which is like the Nintex MVP. They just couldn't call them MVPs. I used to say I'm a new dad. I'm not. He just turned 1. So here's a picture. This is right before he ate sand for the first time. That's us on our family camping trip this year. I am the Director of Business Solutions at a consulting firm called PSC Group. What that means is I typically work in joining the delivery side of things, so the technical stuff, to the sales stuff. So I'm technical sales support architect. I've got my technical chops, but I'm not great at people. So that's me. Also with me today is Chris Foreman with Glasswater Technology. They co-run this user group with us. And I have Jeff Kroll in the back. He is with PSC. Karen Trong, right? Is that how I pronounce it? With Nintex. And is there anyone else from Nintex here? Oh, wow. Okay, a whole group of you. So I don't know if you guys want to introduce yourselves really quickly. Go ahead.
All right. Sorry, Joey. My name is Jonathan Butler. I'm one of the senior support engineers out of the Bellevue office. And then
my name is Pat Brigg, and I'm the Vice President of Global Support for Nintex.
Awesome. So we can just cut this meeting short if you want. All your support questions over there. They'll be providing free support throughout the rest of the presentation here. Okay. Chris, anything you wanted to add?
Nope, good.
All right. So go. Very quick. This is my one slide to plug my company. We're PSC Group. We have about 120 employees. Our focus is building custom business solutions. So that's why Nintex fits really well into the solutions that we offer clients. We don't typically lead with the product. We attack the business problem, and then we try to bring the best solution to you, which in many cases is Nintex. And we've been really excited about trying to bring people who don't have SharePoint as their central platform, this idea of workflow automation, because we used to be able to say, hey, we got this great workflow product for you, but oh, by the way, you need SharePoint, and now you don't, which is great. So that's kind of what we're going to talk about today. So now, the Nintex folks can fact check me on this. I tried to come up with a little diagram here of sort of the evolution of Nintex workflow. Workflow as this sort of designer workflow inside. I'm gonna start in SharePoint world, right? Workflow started in SharePoint with SharePoint Designer 2007. Any of you use that before? Okay, that was like the staple of the design Canvas workflow. Has anyone built Windows workflow foundational workflows before? Okay, so that was like the really techy way to do it. SharePoint Designer gave us the idea of sort of this drag and drop workflow interface. And then shortly after that, and I think it was 2000, I couldn't get the exact date on this. This is actually before I started working with the platform. So Nintex workflow was introduced to sit on top of SharePoint workflow, right? 2010 came this little nifty action called the call HTTP web service action in Nintex workflow. And the reason I put this up here is because this is where we sort of started bringing in the idea of calling external services from within your SharePoint workflows in Nintex. And most of the time, this was going to be SOAP, so not the more widely used RESTful interface that you see now, but using SOAP to communicate with external services. But this was, it's important because this was the ability for Nintex to actually sort of reach outside of its platform and into your other line of business applications. The next thing, this is again entirely outside of Nintex, but 2012, I kind of pinpointed as the time that the RESTful service interface went mainstream. So I'm not going to get really technical in this presentation, but the important thing that I want you to note is you can see over here in 2012, this is just number of public REST APIs, so you kind of get the picture. It doubled in 2012. So what that means is that we got this sort of widespread adoption of RESTful user interfaces, and everybody agreed we're going to talk this way. And that's really important to our conversation today because as we move into the Nintex Office 365 platform, you can see that, how many of you use Office 365 workflow right now? So when you started using that, you may have seen that you get some other connectors that are not just SharePoint focused, right? You get some Office 365 actions, you can add the dynamic CRM connector, you can add a Salesforce connector. Those all communicate via this RESTful interface. And then the most important one that we're going to talk about today is this introduction to Nintex Workflow Cloud. So now we've taken this idea of any business system can communicate with any other business system over a RESTful interface and expanded it to say, you know what, we don't need to have SharePoint in order to integrate with line of business systems. And so Nintex took their designer, their award-winning designer from SharePoint, and they made it completely external to SharePoint. So are any of you here today users of Nintex Workflow Cloud? Okay, one, and he works for Nintex, so that's this is going to be new to all of you. And the idea here is I want to kind of plant the seed in your mind that automation doesn't have to happen inside of SharePoint. And you know, so I'm guessing all of you that use Nintex in some manner, either Office 365 or in SharePoint, right? So this idea that Nintex exists outside of Office 365 and SharePoint isn't new. It's been around since 2015. But like I said, this is something that we've really been excited about bringing to our clients who say, we don't have SharePoint. And so a lot of what I'm going to talk about today also applies to the SharePoint product. So don't think that you're abandoned. And in fact, if you have a Nintex for Office 365 license, you are able to use the Nintex Workflow Cloud license as well. So you actually just get Nintex as a product. It really doesn't matter where you use it. So if you see something that I demo today and you say, hey, this might make sense in my organization, if you are licensed for workflows on a subscription model, it really doesn't matter where you use them or consume them. It's all one product. And I told you I'm a Cubs fan, so I thought I'd put that in there in case any of you forgot. All right, so what that means, this advent of Workflow Cloud, is that we've sort of expanded the reach of automation. So it started on premises. How many of you are on premises right now with SharePoint? So you've had this goodness for a while. It started on premises, and you use SharePoint and Nintex on premises to integrate workflow. If you really wanted to integrate line of business applications, maybe you could trigger off of a list item update, but maybe your line of business system is actually writing that list item. So you find ways to do that. Once we moved to Office 365, you had this idea of you could integrate with SharePoint Online, plus all these other cloud services, and then some of that goodness made its way back to the on-premises product, right? But Nintex Workflow Cloud has opened up this possibility of integration with virtually anything. And so what I'm going to talk about today is how you might integrate Nintex Workflow Cloud with other systems, line of business apps, with other cloud applications. Other cloud applications could literally be any application that is a RESTful endpoint. And then there are also connectors that come out of the box with Nintex, but even that is not the end of the road. The ability to integrate your custom line of business applications with Nintex Workflow Cloud, or if you're using something like Microsoft Flow, a lot of times they get the question, well, should I use Flow or should I use Nintex? Well, guess what? You could use both of them. If there's a connector that's not available in Nintex Workflow Cloud, but you like the Nintex Workflow Cloud designer because it's far superior, then you could actually go into your Flow, use a trigger in Flow, and call an Nintex Workflow Cloud workflow. So I've got all that kind of wired up to show you some basic demos today, and hopefully by the end of this, you can leave here understanding how you can essentially go from anywhere into Nintex Workflow, whether that be in Office 365 or in the cloud, to essentially any other line of business application. So here's what you get out of the box right now in Nintex Workflow Cloud as far as connectors. There's a bunch of stuff out there, SQL Server, there's some Azure AD stuff that they just added. You've got SharePoint, you've got Salesforce, Google Drive, Dropbox, OneDrive. There's a lot of different connectors there. It's not all inclusive. There's not everything that you could possibly need, and I'm going to address that in a minute. How many of you have tried to use some sort of an external start outside of SharePoint to kick off a workflow before? Okay, well, guess what? You can. I will demo it today. So then the idea is, well, you can take these out of the box Nintex Workflow Cloud triggers. Welcome. You can grab food back there too. This is we're keeping it informal. Interrupt me if you guys have any questions. And you can start using these triggers to define your workflows. Now, some of these come out of the box in Nintex Workflow Cloud. Some of them you might want to integrate into your line of business app. Some of them, like I mentioned, you could integrate it with Flow and then go out and call your Nintex Workflow Cloud workflow. So there's a lot of possibilities up here. These are just some of them. But basically, as long as something's got that RESTful webhook, you can get that information into your Workflow Cloud workflow. And as I mentioned, the idea here is really you can go from any trigger to any action in a line of business system or in a cloud system and connect it with Nintex Workflow Cloud. So before I move into sort of demo land, any questions? Yes, sir.
Are you going to go over pricing as well?
I don't have a slide on pricing, but we can address it. We can certainly talk about it. And then I will direct all of the pricing questions over to Karen over here. No, we can address it. So there are two pricing models that Nintex offers. We can address them at a high level. And then Nintex's pricing model typically goes through their vendors, through their partners, like myself and Chris's company, and then we handle that. So yeah, we can definitely address it. Any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
Like small business, like the small business companies or big size, like individual and sales.
It could be, the answer is yes, essentially, right? So a Nintex workflow can be anything from a workflow that maybe you set up as an end user. So you have a process that you are trying to automate, and you want to go and build a workflow around it. You know, it could be as simple as every time I upload a file, I want to, to SharePoint, I want to go through that same file over into this updated box because I want to keep them in sync, or send an email or something like that. It could also be as complex as multiple line of business enterprise systems, calling endpoints and then taking action in other line of business endpoints. So it really depends. I think the answer is yes. The target audience is all the way from enterprise customer, pretty much to individual business user. It doesn't really get to the individual end consumer market. It is a business product, if that makes sense. So if you're looking for more of kind of an individual product, then you're looking more like a this and that, or Flow as part of Office 365 subscription.
I'm actually thinking about the usage, whether it's sales people or organization basically. So what would be the most beneficial? The size of the company that as well. And you have what is the capacity? If it's getting so complex, would there be any?
And I think the easier answer to that question is Nintex does a really good job of reducing the complexity when it comes to design. And then another thing that I'm going to cover today is kind of what that front end looks like. The way that I always say it, as I mentioned, I work with development teams, so one of the hats I wear is architect, and I also work with sales teams, and so I'm really good at making things like blind, stupid, simple, and it's not for the architects, so. I'm just giving you guys a hard time. All right, so does that sort of answer your question? And then we could come back to that too if you have more questions after this. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Real quick, are you going to cut on extension?
I wasn't planning on it, but I would love to talk about extensions because I haven't really gotten into that yet.
Okay.
In fact, when I was looking in Workflow, I mean that's the whole idea, right? Is you can take these and extend them to use your own custom services, right? So you work on this extension slide and just email it to me, and I'll go.
Sounds good.
So what I intend to show you today is just a few ideas of what's possible. These are kind of dumbed down workflows so that you can where the hooks are, how to get them talking to each other, and hopefully envision that maybe one of these little simple workflows that I take off can actually start to really complex. So I'm going to show you a few of them. The first one, I'm going to start with a cloud form, which is actually really so this idea of your Nintex workflow might be actually part of the form. So if you're using SharePoint workflow right now, a lot of SharePoint workflow data computer, you want that data feed into the workflow, and then you're going to connect it. So that's the first one. I'm going to connect that with the first file. All of these kind of setting built action that I can make. But again, those actions, the action, number one. The second is I'm going to talk about, that was something that we've done this time. So this idea that a user interface is a user interface can actually interact. And so the picture I'm trying to paint is something like lesson space or a field where you don't want to give them a form, you want to ask them. Maybe it's for customer support. Someone asking questions, hey, what are you looking for? Like the right product. I'm going to show you what a process is, and after that, and then we're going to connect it with the process and have it actually. And the next thing I'm going to show you is Twitter. And you'll notice that these steps. These next two are Microsoft Pro icons. So what I'm showing you is that is not available in that virtual cloud. You can use Microsoft to kind of bring in other connections. And then you can still say we have to use this interface in that virtual cloud. You know, it's just a better experience, much more powerful than the flow you kind of advertise flow. There's some good things about it. I call it people that really don't have that robust your interface and robust using a brand new right? And then the next one is any. So how about project management? All right. So we use something called management product, our project, and we use a workforce. So in our agile development flow, we'll assign usually the task workforce. I might want to do something with the task force. So in this demo, I'm connecting to the time trigger out of the time. So those are the four main demos I have. We're all going to start with kind of an introduction to the technical cloud interface. I'm going to put that to you now, okay? And it's going to be just a second here for the recording so I can actually share the right screen. And that's it for the deck, by the way, so I'm just going to close the PowerPoint over here. Meanwhile, while I'm getting this set up, any questions that anyone has? No? Okay. Yeah, I will. I'm gonna duplicate in just a second here. these Surface books are great for a lot of things, but saving on memory, not one of them. We're going to post this to the meetup. We're recording it right now. This is the first time we've done that, so fingers crossed that it's actually getting my voice on here. We're going to do that, and then I'll usually post the deck as well. And then, if you have any questions, we usually have a discussion afterwards. And then you can follow up in the forum as well. All right. One more minute. Should be seeing my screen for a second. All right, so the first thing I'm going to show you is, log in over here, is the Nintex Workflow Cloud interface. So, over here. All right, so here is what you see when you log into the Nintex Workflow Cloud. Can you all see that okay? All right, so this is maybe not what you're used to seeing if you work in Office 365 or with Nintex on premises. But the same typical flow applies here. So over here on my left, you can see I'm in the workflow section. So here are several workflows that I've created. I have the ability to import workflows that I've exported previously. It looks a little bit different, but the idea here is we've kind of pulled away from that SharePoint-centric user interface, and now it just looks like any other application. So the first thing I'm going to show you is what a workflow looks like. So when I go to create a workflow, and I'm going to open one that I have here, I've got a designer on the left with a bunch of shapes, just like in the standard Nintex workflow designer, if it ever decides to load. Yeah, well, that's loading. I'll finish signing in over here. How we doing? Okay, so here's my workflow canvas. And you see I've got a really simple workflow here, really nothing that special. The only action that I'm taking is sending an email. And when I send an email, I'm going to pass in some parameters. Now, over here on the left, I have a bunch of shapes. And you'll see as I expand these shapes, I have some things like approval and email that are Nintex specific. All the logic and flow things you'd be used to seeing, so branching, conditioning, a bunch of parallel option, loop, all that you're used to seeing with Nintex. Math operations, collections, etc. I've got some document generation. That's all on the Nintex side. But then you'll see I also have a bunch of actions that I can take in other line of business systems. So Dynamics CRM, Salesforce, Dropbox, Box, ShareFile. We see a lot of usage of ShareFile in the construction industry. Slack, DocuSign, Azure Active Directory, and then of course down here you've got SharePoint Online, which that's actually, they launched that after Workflow Cloud launched, so specifically said we're not going to worry about SharePoint right now, we're going to focus on the non-SharePoint stuff, and then we're going to add that in later. So we got SharePoint Online actions a couple months ago, I think. So if you look at the start conditions for this workflow, what are the conditions that you're used to seeing if you're looking at SharePoint? It's going to be list item added, list item updated, maybe you've got a workflow start form, something like that, right? Well, this exists outside of SharePoint. So if I open up this start shape, what you'll see is I've chosen this public web form. Now this is in preview right now. This isn't public, but this is kind of the next, I would say the next step in terms of next evolution of Nintex workflows. This idea that I can just go and collect information from a public form URL and start a workflow off. And you can see I've just got some variables here. So just much like any other form that I might go build, there's no forms designer. all it does is it takes these variables, it throws them into a form, and then quickly I can go and enter in some information. So in order to send an email, I need to know a few things. I need to know who it's to, who it's from, what the subject is, and what the body is, right? This is all really simple stuff. When I'm done collecting the information, I'm going to actually use the send an email shape, and I'm going to go send it. So that's pretty straightforward. Any questions about this workflow? I hope not. Oh, no. All right. Yes, sir. So in this, Nintex is designed for. There's no conditional access on JavaScript. What happens is I go and I save this off, and I've got this form that gets auto-generated for me, and then it gives me a URL. That's it. No, this is literally just a URL, and then Nintex hosts it, and it collects information for me. You'll see it. I'll show you in just a second. So when I publish this, and I'm not going to publish it because it already published, I can go and look at this and say, hey, I've got this public web form URL. And all it does is it gives me a URL. And if I go and copy the URL and paste it into my browser, that's it. Really straightforward. There's not a lot here. Yeah. So you would link to this from whatever you find. Right. So I'm going to just send an email to myself. I'm going to send it from Jeff because I want to. Thanks, Jeff. Appreciate it. All right, so there we go. The form got submitted. Now, how do I know if my workflow is running? So then I can go over here in instances and see the actual instances of the workflow that have run. Now, over here, here's the instance that just ran and completed. It's going to show me the time that it started, that it finished, and then it's going to show me all the activities that occurred during that workflow. So again, really simple workflow here, but it's nice to be able to see that I can actually go and create a public form without any work and go and collect some information. So somewhere in here, I'm just going to assume that I got this email. Maybe I should check for it, huh? Look at that. All right, so there's the email that Jeff sent me. Thanks, Jeff. Really appreciate it. I'm glad you're paying attention. All right. So that is probably the simplest instance of going out and creating a really simple workflow in Workflow Cloud in the format like that. What is the road? I know further down the line that's one of the how far along form product for Workflow Cloud and what are the expectations?
As far as I
And I think the other thing, and this is where we'll kind of it's great to have the best form of that, but what's even greater is and you get something called so So, remember when I talked about RESTful services, right? A RESTful service is just an endpoint URL. You give it an HTTP post, and then you send it some data. That's all it is. I know it sounds a little bit technical, but realistically, it's just listening for you to go call it. That's all it is. So if I go and look at another one of these workflows, now I created this for a bot demo. So it's called bot workflow, but all it does is send an email. And I didn't rename it because I didn't want to screw up with my URL. So all I've done is created that exact same workflow that I just showed you here. I've got my to, from, email subject, and body. This is data I'm collecting, but instead of collecting it through a form, I'm collecting it through something called external start. And what that means is I can go and hook this workflow up to any line of business system as long as that business system knows the URL that I'm trying to hit and the parameters that I have to send to it, I can kick that workflow off. So I'm going to show you what that looks like. In my little ellipsis over here on this workflow, I can get this external start URL. And this URL is the URL that I would go give to the developer of my line of business system and say, hey, I want you to integrate with this. He says, well, how do I do that? I don't know how to do it. Well, then I can send them something called the Swagger. And the Swagger is this spec that says everything about my external start URL, everything about this little RESTful service, so that he can go plug that into his system and figure out really quickly how to use that. And I'll show you what that looks like with Flow. It's really cool. It's a key play. In this case, I actually wrote code that's going to go out and follow. And I wrote that code in something called a bot. And a bot is a user interface that allows you to have a conversational interaction with the line of business. So how many of you have ever asked for help when you're on a website? Browsing it, you get that little thing that says, hello, I can help you. Guess what? Not them just sitting there like chatting with you right away. Right? The very first thing that they're going to do is ask you, try to route you to the right tree, and then eventually going to talk to you. The first step is an interaction that you have when you type in one of those types of documents. And they're keying off of words that in that part of the window, and they're routing. So you can use a bot in your line of business system. An example that I like to give is one that we're actually built for a client a while ago. Following it now. But we've got some field construction and this protocol. And we wanted to say, okay, well, we want these guys to fill out a form. That's great, except for what kind of training you have. You're going to go get all of your skilled workers training for check it out. How are you going to control what devices they use? The whole MDM, right? So this idea of a bot, we can hook it up to where we can go and give them the phone number, 5656, and then it says, hey, you want to report data? What it's going to do is ask you what's happening. Then it's going to say, what's the next step? My grandpa. Right? I probably can't say them before, but you can use that. Right? So that's the idea of bot. And then what I'm going to show you is a really simple bot. So as I'm wiring this up, I will try to answer questions as I do it. Any questions? No. So is using the Azure bot. That bot has nothing to do with Nintex. Nintex is workflow platform. Bot is just one of the interfaces that I use to follow. And the beauty here is separation between my business process tools engine, the workflow, and then whatever interface I want to get. To answer your question. All right. So here's my bot. You don't have to worry about the fact that I have code here. It's not a big deal. It's just how I start my little bot running. So this is going to open up in Chrome, and this just tells me that my bot's running over here. And then I'm going to go over here, and I'm going to talk to my bot. All right, so my bot's running. Now, this bot emulator that you see here, this could be any sort of UI that I want to hook in. You publish a bot on the Microsoft bot server. You can publish it in Microsoft. Okay, text message. You have lots of other interfaces that kind of sit on top of the bot framework, and no matter what your users are using, you do that. That also means you can publish the same bot multiple. all the wonderful business, tax, etc. So here I am talking to my bot, and I'm just going to tell my bot hello so that it knows that I want to talk to it. And so here I'm going to zoom this in a little bit. I don't know if you guys can see that. Okay, is that a little bit better? Maybe. The bot replied to me, and I control all these interactions in my line of business application, right? So the bot says, hey, I want to give you some options of something to do. So I want to send an email, great. And then it says, hey, what's the address? Okay, I'm going to send it to myself again. All right. And then what's my message? Okay. Okay. All right, and who should send this? You know what? I don't know your exact email address, but it doesn't matter. We're going to send this from Doug. Thanks, Doug. I really appreciate that. And I have a breakpoint set here just so you can see that at this point, I'm going out and I'm calling the Nintex Workflow Cloud endpoint. All right? So all I'm doing over here, maybe I can zoom this in a little bit so you can see it better. Or maybe I can't. Yes, I can. Okay. Again, not trying to get code. What I want to show you is this parameter that my workflow has exposed via that REST circuit. So those could be anything that you want them to be. They can be of multiple types. You can have integers, you can have text, arrays, right? This is just a bunch of information that I'm feeding into my bot. And then I'm going to go and I'm going to call that bot. I'm going to call that workflow. And here, this endpoint URL, this is that same URL that I put. All right? And I'm going to go out. I'm going to call the workflow. The workflow says, hey, I got it. Nintex is nice enough to give me a response that says, hey, we're good. I got all the information I needed. And I'm going to tell my bot, okay, hey, look, this is the email that I just sent. So let's go see what happened on the Nintex side. I'm going to check out the instances over here. And look, there's my dev bot workflow that just got called. You can see that it started at 12:51. That looks like the right time. Yes, it is. And it finished at 12:51. Nice and quick. Now, somewhere over here, I should have gotten an email message. And I'm sure it'll come in just a second as soon as I go out and send it. So look at that. So Doug, thank you so much. I don't think that's your actual email address, but I appreciate the compliment and the wink faces. All right, so that's interacting with the bot. Any questions? I talk? Yes. Yeah. So it's a little bit of a far cry. But the idea is that you are holding the bots themselves are really powerful. It's not, you can certainly hold it and go down and try to find out all of that. It's behind that is about the block. I want to make it clear that the bot platform is something that's outside of the Microsoft bot platform, but yeah, they're interactive platforms, right? So the idea is that you are moving outside of the physical form, so that it will start collecting the physical. So that's it. Other questions? Okay, so what did I say the next demo was going to be? It was Twitter, right? How many of you are on Twitter? Okay, I'm going to ask one of you. I want you to use the hashtag Nintex Chicago. at use the app and go ahead. If you want to ask me, go for it. At Johnson. So, got it. And well, I'm showing you how this is wired up. Tweet me, and then hopefully by the time these workflows run, we'll have a couple of demos to show you. Okay, so Twitter is just an example of an interface that Nintex provides. Okay, that's fine. Complex operations, but maybe I want to do something where I connect to something that Nintex Workflow Cloud doesn't have a default connector for. So I'm going to use Microsoft Flow. I chose that because a lot of you run Office 365, a lot of you are Flow. And most importantly, I get a lot of questions about why would I run Nintex. Flow is great for sort of then that. As something where I want to do one thing, and then one system, I want to do something, another system will go great for that. It's really not an enterprise tool. Okay, so Flow is built, it runs in the context of single users. It doesn't run in sort of an enterprise. It started to do some of that functionality in an enterprise ready. But Flow itself is mostly not an not necessarily. So I think that's really here right now, and there is a little evolved for it. But right now, from the standpoint of what we were expecting to do, this is pretty start to. But what I'm showing you now is there are some connectors potentially that I don't have in Nintex Workflow Cloud that I want to take advantage of. So I created a flow that's going to watch for that hashtag. And when it sees a tweet with that hashtag, it's going to do what? It's actually going to go and call my Nintex Workflow Cloud workflow. All right, so I'm not defining the workflow in Flow. All I'm doing is telling Flow to go back to Workflow Cloud, and then I've got anything I want to do in Workflow Cloud, and then write pretty visual design, right? Same thing. All I'm doing is calling an endpoint. Except for this is what's really cool about this one. Wrong one. Helps, I clicked the right one, huh? Okay. So I'm going to edit this flow, and what you can see here is all I've done is say when a new tweet's posted, I want to do something. So I'm actually going to remove this here, and I'm going to rebuild it for you so you can see what this looks like, because this is what's really cool. So here I am in Nintex Workflow Cloud, and I've got this little workflow, this dev.bot workflow, right? This is where I've defined the parameters, email to, from, subject, body, etc. Right? I'm going to grab that URL again, and I'm going to grab that. It's called the Swagger. And I'm going to go over here in Flow and say, hey, I want to, when I find this tweet, I want to go and call that. So if I start searching for HTTP in Flow, I've got this HTTP plus Swagger action. And if I just paste that URL in here and hit next, it goes out, and this is where I told you, you can hand this over to your developers and say, hey, just call this, and we're going to tell you everything you need to know about it. It already found this workflow. In fact, it found it. It read that Swagger information, that little reference API, and it told me here are all the parameters that you have to enter in order to call the workflow, which is great because I don't have to go and read through all of that JSON array of resters, because I can just paste, go, figure it out. So I'm going to say, hey, we found a new tweet. And in there, I'm going to say the title was, that's not a title, that's not really a thing. I'm going to say the user who tweeted it. This is the username. And then I'm going to say tweet text is the actual content of the tweet. And I don't want to use that user. I want to use the tweeted by. Okay. And then I'm going to send the email again. I'm going to send it for myself this time. And I'm going to send it to myself. And you can see that I've already got this token here. All that is saying you're authenticated to this, right? This is the token that I'm using. Okay, I'm going to update that flow. Boom, done. Now, I will tell you that this demo, as I played it with this morning, is a little slow running. That's this idea of search. Whoever actually plays the Twitter API, you are looking over billions and billions of messages. So it's not exactly what it's there. But it's cool because I can do it all in one. So you can see that this ran a couple of minutes ago for just a few seconds, right? So let's go and look at the Nintex Workflow Cloud now and see, did my workflow actually get called? So look at that. It got called. So now I've got Twitter calling Flow, calling my workflow thing, right? So there's a whole bunch of systems connected over here. And again, let's just check. Look at that. I got a new tweet. Jonathan Butler, thank you so much. Baller presentation, thank you. I was striving for baller today, and I'm glad I got that. So thank you. Appreciate it. So that's Twitter, connected through Flow. So I'm going to show you one more demo, which is I'm going to try to kind of draw that parallel again to over to the project managers here. So I have another flow just like this. Again, all I'm doing is calling the Nintex workflow from my flow, but this time I'm going to use a different trigger. All right. So again, this is a trigger that's not currently available in Nintex Workflow Cloud, but it is a trigger that I can go and grab from Flow. So here's my trigger. The trigger is Visual Studio Team Services. All right. So here I've got a project. Jeff is a little bit a slave driver and assigning me work on this project, even though I tell him I've got a presentation to get ready for. So here we are in the workboard for the project. And if you look over here, I've got this user story, and Jeff says, look, man, we need you to get this done, especially there's a bug there. I'm going to go and assign this to you. So we're going to assign me this user story, and actually there's a bug. And he says, look, man, your code is broken. So stop breaking the code, huh? All right, so I'm going to assign that to myself as well, just so we can get a few actions queued up over here. And look, that bug, it's been approved by the end users. It's really a bug. Okay, so we assigned me a couple of work items. So let's take a look at the flow. So again, in this case, I've got a flow that has one trigger, and it's got one action. That's all it is. I'm using flow just as sort of a connector here. If you look at this when a work item is assigned, I've connected it to my Visual Studio Team Services license. And then I can say anytime a work item is assigned to, and I am able to choose from all of the members of this development team, all right? And now I'm doing the same thing. I'm calling over here to this workflow, but I'm passing in some other information. So now in the email body, I'm passing in a bunch of information about the work item, which is then going to be a workflow, and it's being included in the body of the email. So let's try this one more time. Let's see what else ran. Take a look at my Nintex workflow instances. Do we have any new ones? What was it? 101, 102 maybe when I did that? This one was pretty slow too when I was testing it this morning. We'll give it a try. All right, well, we're going to wait a little bit. Any questions while I'm waiting? When I say literally anything, as long as you can connect it to a web service, and you can go find a service out there in the cloud that doesn't do it. And now, if I can translate that, I can go and line of business, or I can also something. As long as I expose that URL like that, as long as I expose it, I think I can get that. I can get matching the Nintex Workflow Cloud. Use the Nintex Workflow Cloud directly in fact, you publish that then to your end user. Now your end user says, all regular users say, I want to go, right, here's my app. I want to go take a step to that. But it's why? Okay, looks like my work is all set. That one finally. Geez, you got to wait a couple minutes these days. I'm very impatient. Let's refresh my my emails here. Okay, so there we go. So I've got a new work item assigned, and it included some of that information that I have to. That is the work item that's in that, and went towards the cloud. So pretty cool, right? So I hope that did a good job of kind of helping you envision how you can really connect everything with Nintex Workflow Cloud for sitting there. And I think the most powerful part of that is whatever happens over here, whatever happens over here, you were able to define a way that a way that it not require code updates in order to put code in production, a way that allows changes as necessary. And so when I say you can hand this to your developers, all you do is this part and this part, and then you do the rest of it. So for pretty powerful stuff, that's Nintex Workflow Cloud. Any questions before I move on to the question was, by the way, I'm not repeat on the phone here, but the question is, do you really need to yeah. Right? A lot of these systems, I'll show you in the designer over here. A lot of the connections in Nintex Workflow Cloud are there for you. You're able to go and connect. So let me take a look at this one, for example. If I want to do something like, I don't know, update something in SharePoint. That's a good example. This is not a SharePoint form, but I'm updating something in SharePoint. You don't need to write a line of code. And have you not used Nintex before? So this kind of your first. So the concept is that this is a truly visual workflow. So you don't need to know how to write a single line of code. In fact, you could just go over here and say, I want to do something like send an email, or maybe I want to get approval on something. And over here in this approval shape, you just define some of the parameters. Who am I sending it to? And what am I going to ask them to do? And then Nintex will take care of the rest for you. So Nintex itself is really designed to take that and put that in the and then when you start talking about, well, I want to integrate the other line, you customize ones that don't necessarily Nintex. That's when we'll talk about other questions? Yeah. I started directly to business tools like security, so creating for partners. There is not a direct path though. So what system will do is to line that up for us, but therefore question was, can you migrate in personal size as opposed to SharePoint or Office 365? You can go and impact on premise, impact SharePoint in the cloud, the workflow cloud. Here.
Well, and further down to it, that it is not the user that's for the office. Really, what happened is why sure. Or kind of the airplane. I have one corner of your outside that upgrade and maybe that you're out of the Microsoft, right? Working at it. Then you don't want your SharePoint guys behind you work. You might want to have other stuff. Good. Hey, education is all over. I don't ever make no, I was looking through the health document, one file, round up and okay, all right, so the next thing I'm going to show you for all the SharePoint people, which is all of you, I think, is what the new Nintex responsive forms look like. So this is actually pretty cool. No. Jeff, you said it's live in our tenant, right? So I can probably do this one. Yeah, I think it's rolled out globally now, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
All right, so here, you know what I'm going to do here? For my client privacy, I'm going to do this. Hold, please. I've got a dev site that I'll put up today. Stop sharing just for a second while I log in over here. So for those of you watching on video. We can take a 5-minute break if you guys want to like bio break and get some water. So can you all see this okay? Good. All right. So and Jeff, are we good on the recording? Can you see my screen now? Loading. Okay. So what I'm going to show you now is a demo of the new responsive forms designer. So this is actually live in production tenants at this point. So if you have Office 365, you can go and play with this today. I'm going to set up this scenario that I actually briefly mentioned to you a little while ago, where I'm talking about reporting safety incidents in the field. So this is a development version of something that we built for one of our clients. The requirement they came to us with was I need to be able to submit safety incidents from the field. We had going live in production first is going to be the idea of being able to do this from your phone. So someone trips, breaks an ankle, maybe they break the machinery, that they need to have someone in the field be able to go out and take a picture with their phone and start a workflow. So from our perspective, this is in SharePoint, right? It's in SharePoint in Office 365. The whole complex workflow that starts after this. The form is just as important. So the first thing that we said is, well, why don't we just use the out-of-the-box
SharePoint list form because it's responsive now. You can load it from a mobile phone. It's pretty straightforward. The problem with that was it's actually pretty gosh-darn slow. It's just not the fast experience, and having to type in a URL from your phone, even though you could do it in a pinch, not fast enough. And some of the metrics that we're trying to measure is how soon it gets reported. So if you're going to go to your supers or website and say, hey, we want you to report this sooner, so then by the way, that's a key URL every time you go report an incident, that didn't go over very well. So they're Nintex customers. We do some Nintex work for them, and so we said we want to the Nintex form to do this. And we're actually looking at using Nintex App Studio to distribute this to them, which is also really cool. So they just tap an icon on their phone, it pulls up the form, it's pretty straightforward. So what I'm going to show you is the responsive designer interface, which is going to give you the same exact experience whether you're on a desktop, a tablet, a mobile device, or through the Nintex Forms app. So here I am in my SharePoint list. I have some metadata that I'm collecting, including when the incident occurred, maybe what job it's related to, if there was an injury, were there some body parts injured as part of that. And just to kind of put this in context for you, because I like to tell a story with this, this is the dashboard that the supers and some of the executives see when they go to, when we actually collect it. So we're actually able to give them an injury where people are actually hurt based on the data that we're collecting from the form. We can show them a map of the United States that says where are the most incidents occurring, right? And this is all based on that job information. So people single Nintex form, which is still on their phone. Power BI ever wants to load for me. All right, so we've got this dashboard now where they can see incidents by month, incidents by location, by time of day. We can start to break this down and give them actual meaningful information about the stuff that's happening. This is a development instance, so you won't see any real production data here, but you get the point, and I can break this down, and then I can say, okay, injuries. So if I report that someone was injured, where is that happening on the body? Maybe, and these are all based, these are all based false data, because of the area, right? But where are these happening, and how many of them are happening at a per location basis? Or another way to look at how am I breaking down some of this information. And then I can click on one of these, and it's actually going to filter the rest of this data for me. So this is Power BI. And again, this really isn't related to Nintex specifically, but to kind of give you a view of an end-to-end flow here, this is the kind of visualization and the kind of executive level rollout you can provide to your clients when you start to use Nintex form to collect data. Okay, so back to the list. And this is, by the way, this is all reporting off of a SharePoint list. So here I am in SharePoint, and I want to create a form for this. And I'll show you first what the out-of-the-box SharePoint form looks like, so you can take a look. And SharePoint has come a long way as far as building actual responsive forms. So load this on your phone, or if you load this in the SharePoint app on your phone, you do get a pretty consistent experience here. It's really not that bad. That said, you really don't want to go and load that and type in a URL on your phone. It gets kind of cumbersome. So I'm going to go and create a Nintex mobile form for this. And when I click the Nintex Forms button now, I should be prompted to go and create a responsive form or use the traditional pixel perfect form designer. So as this loads, hey, by the way, we made a change. You've got responsive forms. Awesome. So now when I create a form, instead of just opening the designer right away, I can choose the classic form, which, I guess they're not calling it pixel perfect. I don't know. I thought that's what they're going to call it. Classic form. That kind of marries with the SharePoint terminology. So I can either do a classic form or a responsive form. And you'll notice when I create a responsive form, this looks a little bit different than what you're using. So how many of you are using Nintex forms right now? Okay, so tremendously powerful product. The ability to take what SharePoint doesn't allow you to do, which is have a UI around customizing your forms. Nintex will do that as far as auto-generating that form for you. But here's where the magic starts. Instead of me moving everything pixel by pixel here, I can start to drag fields around and it's just going to auto-arrange them for me. So maybe, really simply, I want to just create a few of these side by side, because on the desktop form, I don't need to go vertical. It's kind of annoying. I don't want my users to have to scroll. So I'm going to just kind of arrange these so that they're in order. And then at the bottom, I'm going to say, you know what, these attachments, that's fine, but I actually want it to be called photos because that's what the users are going to do. They're going to take a photo of that, right? So here's my form. It's pretty straightforward. I'm going to go here and I'm going to publish it. Now, when I publish it, I can actually preview it before I use it, right? And I can preview what it's going to look like on any of these mediums. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to look at it from desktop. And this shouldn't be that surprising. It looks almost exactly as I have it in the designer. The fields come up side by side, and there's not much surprise there. So here we go. Here's my form side by side. I can fill this out and go and select some of this information. Say, hey, I hurt my left wrist. This is pretty straightforward. Well, now I want to see what is it going to look like on a mobile device. All right, well, let's look at that. What does this look like on a phone? So before, if you wanted to create a mobile layout for your Nintex form, you had to go out and you create a layout, right? And you could either choose mobile phone, or you could choose tablet, or you could choose Nintex mobile. Well, I don't have that option anymore because now it automatically just bumps everything down and it arranges it exactly as I want it, exactly as is optimized for this phone. So there was no work that I had to do in order to generate that mobile view. It just happens out of the box. Things are displayed on the form in order. Exactly. So if you put something to the right of something, then it will appear below it in a mobile, which is exactly what you would want from a forms designer, right? So that's pretty cool. But what about Nintex Mobile? So I'm going to publish this out. And actually, if you go into the settings here, oops, not that one. So I go into my form settings. I can go in and say, I want to keep this in Nintex Mobile. And I can actually view this on my phone using the Nintex mobile app. So I'm going to do that, and I'm going to find a way to project that to you here. So if you can hold on just a second. Pardon? I have not yet. Thank you. I gotta wire this up. Any questions while I'm getting this demo moving here? I am not a huge fan of the Power App designer, so that's why I use the Power App. Power Apps have come a long way. That used to be a lot easier to test. At this point, I don't know enough about Power Apps. And I think the benefit that I see in Nintex Mobile and Nintex Forms over Power Apps, and like I said, I anticipate that Power Apps is going to continue to evolve, but much like Flow, the Nintex, so I don't think it's there yet. And it may get to the point where kind of workflow and Nintex workflow are now. All right, so we're published. Now let's see if I can preview this. All right, I'm going to try to show you what this looks like on my phone, actually. Oh, this might take a second. I'll keep any questions while I do this. I'm going to have to log into the Wi-Fi here, so this might take a minute. In this case, all the data is sitting in SharePoint. So if you're running a SharePoint workflow and you're working with Nintex forms and workflow in SharePoint, then connecting Power BI is straightforward. At this point, you have to use Power BI desktop designer as opposed to the web designer. But okay, it looks like getting on the web is not going to happen. So that demo might not work well. But at least we got to look at the design. Responsive forms design, right?
Is there any?
I don't believe so. I think you have to delete the existing one and then recreate it. I will not. I haven't been able to do that. Right? There's no straightforward path. And that makes sense because it's built on a completely different engine. And in terms of why you might want to use one over the other, no custom JavaScript support in responsive forms at this point, right? So relying on custom JavaScript, then I want to still say it's perfect. You do have access to some of the functions that you have access to in the Purchase Designer, but as far as like, all the big variants you want to get so that was pretty fun, right? And the benefit there is I can do something like that. And those are things I don't know how to play. Okay, other questions? Well, I planned it for like 2 days, so there is a new rule engine, and I think it's the idea is that you can say update value and something else happens. But I honestly don't know if that's been pushed out yet. So why don't we just play? You know what? We can ad-lib this. Let's try. So you can now do something like this. So here we go. If I say I want to set, if I go and I set the title, I want to include the title of this in my description. All right, that's a pretty straightforward. So I'm going to say when. Let's see if this. And to be honest, I don't know if this is going to work, but we're going to find out. I don't know. Maybe I would do that on the other one. Let's see. Huh. I might have to play with this a little bit. I don't know how I would necessarily do this. To be honest, I've not played with this before. But assumedly, you could set one field's value based on the other. I mean, I think that's the idea. I'm used to doing it with JavaScript. So, other questions? This is live. Oh, on premises? I don't know if they're on premises. No, that's not what I'm saying. No, not imminent, right?
Not today. But now it's
So you heard that, or Nintex 1.5. Other questions? They don't have to be related to this. The answer, you've got some good brains in the room as far as this. I can't answer this. So I think the Tableau is usually back-end database. I don't think it's Tableau is one hit only, but this particular product will have some dash report. So this would be only report to that. You can connect it such that you can take access to other databases that want to use this flow. Something SharePoint. The thing that I cited it is called the data. There's fire not there. You can connect the forms to the line, kind of board. So update the line and then have them roll up. Sure. Yeah, and you can just work with do that if you know whatever. Other question? Okay, I'll be here afterwards. Nintex. So thank you for coming. Our next meetup is, I believe we're skipping the 10th. That sounds right, John? I don't remember exactly. We might be, so check the meetup site. I don't remember exactly. I might have checked that before I got here. But the next meetup will be downtown. That's the first. So it's oh yeah, anyone go to Ignite? Oh, nobody's going to Ignite. All the SharePoint folks there. Okay, go to Ignite.